The scalding steam was still rising from Ivy's back when I dropped to my knees beside her wheelchair. Her skin was blistering, her screams slicing through the rose-scented air, and there stood Marla Whitmore gripping a designer wine cup with a smile of smug satisfaction. She had no idea the mother she just burned was a trauma surgeon, or that every second of her cruelty had been caught on camera. What would you do if someone deliberately poured boiling tea onto your disabled child because they thought she didn't belong in a playground lined with roses? I still hear the scream. That high-pitched primal cry that shattered the silence of a beautiful Saturday morning. My daughter Ivy, just 11 years old, her skin blistering, her body shaking, and that cup, ceramic and florals, still steaming, in the hand of the woman who smiled as if nothing had happened. My name is Dr. Lena Carter. I'm a trauma surgeon, newly appointed head of emergency surgery at UCSF. And what Marla Whitmore didn't know when she scalded my daughter in front of a dozen witnesses is that she had just handed a burn specialist every piece of evidence needed to put her behind bars. 3 months ago, I moved to Rosewood Bluffs with Ivy to start over. We needed it. The last 2 years had drained us physically, emotionally, spiritually. Ivy's accident was supposed to be a fun summer boating trip. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. A malfunctioning motor, a sudden jolt, and Ivy was thrown from the deck. The rescue was fast, but the damage was permanent. A spinal cord injury that left her partially paralyzed from the waist down. My husband had already passed away 4 years earlier from cancer. After Ivy's accident, it felt like life had knocked the breath out of both of us. She was only 9 when it happened, and in the span of minutes, the vibrant little girl who used to dance through the kitchen now needed a wheelchair to get through the hall. But she never let it dim her spirit. Ivy is stubborn in the best way. She refused pity, rejected excuses, and insisted on going back to school, back to swimming, and adapted programs back to living. When I was offered the job at UCSF, we saw it as our second chance. Rosewood Bluffs, with its manicured lawns, rose-lined walking trails, and promise of community charm, seemed perfect. The house we chose was single-level accessible and backed up to a greenbelt. Ivy loved the scent of roses that bloomed just beyond our porch. What we didn't know, what no brochure or smiling realtor would tell us, was that Rosewood Bluffs came with Marla Whitmore. She introduced herself within minutes of our moving truck arriving. Blonde hair in a precision bob athleisure that cost more than most wedding gowns, and a wine tumbler that never seemed to leave her hand. "We like things tidy here," she said, eyeing the ramp being installed for Ivy's wheelchair. "I assume you filed the appropriate request for that modification I had." She knew I had, but it was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Marla found issue after issue, Ivy's therapy bans visible on the back porch against HOA guidelines, our doorbell camera disruptive to the neighborhood aesthetic, and when Ivy's classmates came by for a group project and stayed past 6 p.m. on a school night, inappropriate gatherings. I tried to stay cordial. I've seen far worse egos in hospital boardrooms. I thought if I stayed professional, she'd get bored and move on. I was wrong. That Saturday morning, Ivy had been in great spirits. The weather was perfect, cool breeze, warm sun, the kind of day where hope felt tangible. Ivy asked if she could roll down to the community playground to meet her friends Ellie and Caleb. I hesitated. I had paperwork to finish, but saw her hopeful eyes and smiled. "Emergency phone charge?" I asked. She nodded. "Ellie's mom is out front gardening. I'll be safe, promise." I kissed her forehead and watched her roll away auburn hair pulled into a ponytail that bounced with every turn of her wheels. Her laughter echoed faintly as she disappeared past the rose arbor. I went inside, pulled up trauma charts, and settled into my weekend routine. It didn't last long. Ivy's scream pierced the air like a siren of war. I was running before I even registered it. My clipboard crashed to the floor. By the time I turned the corner past the arbor, I saw the worst thing a mother could see: Ivy slumped in her wheelchair, her shirt soaked steam rising from her back. Her skin was turning a mottled red and white, blistering in real time. Ellie and Caleb stood frozen nearby, horrified. And there she was, Marla, standing with a ceramic teacup, its matching lid discarded in the mulch. No remorse, just that smug, dry smile. "She wouldn't leave," Marla said coolly as I rushed forward. I told them they were disrupting the calm of the gardens. She was loud, and when I tried to ask her to leave, well, she mouthed off. I tripped. It spilled. She didn't trip. There wasn't a single sign of imbalance. No broken cup, no wet shoe. Just a controlled pour, and the echo of hate disguised as HOA authority. Back away from her, I barked, dropping to my knees. Ivy was shaking, tears spilling down her face. Don't touch her, I snapped at the kids. She's burned second degree at least. Maybe worse. My voice shifted into command mode, the same voice I use in the ER when seconds matter more than emotions. I needed cool water. I scanned for a fountain and saw one near the picnic area. Ellie, Caleb, bring me water. Not cold, just cool. Don't dump it. Bring cups gently. They bolted. Then I looked at Marla. My hands were already assessing Ivy's skin, noting damage, calculating surface area affected, preparing for what was next. But my words were surgical. Precise. You poured boiling liquid on an 11-year-old girl in a public playground. That's felony assault with a weapon. I'm a trauma surgeon. I know what these burns mean. You may have just permanently disfigured her. Marla scoffed. Oh, please. She shouldn't even be here. That playground wasn't built for wheelchairs. It's not some special needs retreat. Behind me, a voice cut in. I got it all on video. Dean Marshall, a retired firefighter who lived 2 houses away, stood with his phone raised. From the moment you marched up to those kids like you owned the place, I started recording. I've already called 911. I wanted to hug him, but I kept working. Ellie returned with a plastic pitcher. I carefully poured water over Ivy's exposed skin, whispering comfort into her ear. You're safe now, baby. I've got you. We're cooling the burns. You're going to be okay, I promise. Sirens arrived within minutes. Paramedics rushed forward. One of them, Sam Rodriguez, recognized me from UCSF. Dr. Carter, he blinked. Your daughter, I nodded, too focused to speak. We've got her, he assured me gently. We'll manage the transport. Do you want to ride with us? I'm not leaving her, I replied instantly. As they lifted Ivy onto the stretcher, I saw Marla trying to quietly walk away. Ma'am, one of the responding officers called. I need you to stay right there. Marla spun around with a look of indignation. Do you even know who I am? I'm the president of this HOA. These kids were being disruptive. I was just trying to keep order. The officer, a no-nonsense woman with short cropped hair and narrowed eyes, stepped forward. Ma'am, you're being detained under suspicion of felony assault and endangering a minor. Put down the cup, keep your hands visible, and save the excuses for your lawyer. The last thing I saw as the ambulance doors closed was Marla being placed in cuffs, her wine tumbler lying forgotten near the rose bushes. And I knew right then this wasn't over, but it was the beginning of something far more powerful than her hate. I held Ivy's hand the entire ride. Her lips trembled as she whispered, Why would someone do that to me, Mom? I wasn't doing anything wrong. I squeezed her hand, the scent of roses lingering faintly on her clothes, now soaked with pain. Because some people only see difference as a threat. But I promise you she won't hurt anyone else again. And I meant every word. The ambulance lights still pulsed in my mind long after we arrived at the hospital. I sat beside Ivy, clutching her small, trembling hand as the burn team moved with rapid precision. My daughter lay pale but conscious, her skin flushed red, and angry, her breathing shallow. The paramedics had done what they could en route, but I knew the real work was just beginning. I had spent most of my career in emergency rooms watching other families break apart while I held the scalpel. But this was different. This was my child, my Ivy. We've got her, Dr. Carter, said Dr. Rachel Lynn, one of our top pediatric burn specialists, as she met us at the ER bay. You can stay, but I need you to step out of clinician mode and just be mom right now. I nodded, though every part of me wanted to oversee every treatment. 15% surface area, I said quietly, handing over my notes. Primarily shoulders, upper back, right arm. No respiratory distress on scene. Blisters already forming. Dr. Lynn gave me a sharp look of gratitude. It was the kind of clear-eyed clinical relay that saved time and lives. Ivy was wheeled into the burn unit, her small body surrounded by trained professionals, and I followed with the heavy steps of someone who'd seen pain from every angle, but never like this. While the team stabilized her, cleaned the burns, and administered pain meds, I sat outside in a cold plastic chair that never felt colder. My hands were still stained with diluted herbal tea and rose mulch, the scent sickening now. Less than 2 hours earlier, I had been reviewing case files at the kitchen table. Now I was praying my daughter wouldn't scream when they removed her bandages. A nurse came out with an update: stable condition, second-degree burns, confirmed no need for intubation. It was a win technically, but it didn't feel like one. I finally allowed myself to breathe. Detective Angela Monroe met me in the waiting area, her notepad out, her eyes steady. "We've reviewed the footage Mr. Marshall provided," she said. "It's damning. Clear approach. Direct verbal threats." She poured the tea with full visibility and no signs of a stumble. I knotted my throat tight. She didn't trip. She targeted her. "We're treating it as felony assault and child endangerment," Monroe continued. "And we're also pursuing the angle of a hate crime due to the remarks about Ivy's disability." My stomach clenched. I had been so focused on saving Ivy that I hadn't let myself process the hate behind Marla's words. "She said the playground wasn't made for special use," I said quietly. "She made my daughter feel like a trespasser in a garden she had every right to enjoy." Monroe's eyes darkened. "That's all in the video," along with her tone, her body language, and the fact she didn't even try to help afterward. The moment I heard that, my professional detachment broke. I stood up, fists clenched at my sides. "That woman needs to face every ounce of legal accountability." I said, my voice low and steady. "She assaulted a disabled child. My child. She tried to mask cruelty as regulation. I'm not settling. I'm not walking away." Later that evening, Ivy stirred. Her face was pale, but her eyes were open and full of groggy awareness. "Mom," she whispered. I leaned in, brushing hair from her forehead. "I'm right here, sweet pea." Her lips quivered. "Did she get away?" "No," I said gently. "She was arrested. There's a police officer outside your door right now. You're safe." Ivy blinked, tears spilling. She said I didn't belong there, that I was ruining it. My throat tightened. I had heard those words too, and they echoed in my chest like gunshots. "She's wrong," I said firmly. "You belong anywhere you want to be." In the following days, word of what happened spread through Rosewood Bluffs faster than wildfire. The footage Dean Marshall had captured circulated on neighborhood message boards, and for the first time, silence cracked. Neighbors who had once smiled politely and turned the other cheek were suddenly outraged. Meal trains were organized. Get well cards arrived by the dozens. One neighbor, a father of a wheelchair-using son, dropped off an accessibility toolkit and offered to install safety features in our home free of charge. Mrs. Ellington, the HOA secretary, called me in tears. "We were all scared of Marla," she confessed. "She's been intimidating people for years. But what she did to Ivy, it woke us up." Within a week, an emergency HOA meeting was called. I didn't attend. I was still at the hospital most nights, but I received updates from Dean. Marla had been officially removed from her role as president. The vote had been unanimous. Her husband filed for divorce shortly after. According to neighbors, he had moved out quietly the night of the incident and hadn't returned. Their sprawling, ivy-covered house was suddenly up for sale, its listing noticeably missing the once proud president's residence plaque. Meanwhile, Ivy's recovery was steady but painful. Burn dressings were changed daily. Her nerve endings, already damaged from the accident, were hypersensitive in new ways. Every touch was a negotiation between pain and healing, but she never stopped asking questions. "What's the name of the burn lotion they're using? Why do second-degree burns blister but not third? When can I swim again?" That curiosity, that spark, never left her. One afternoon, as we sat watching the rose bushes from her hospital window, Ivy said quietly, "Mom, can I talk to other kids about this?" I turned to her, confused. "About what happened?" She nodded. "About how some people still see kids like me as less. About how that's not okay." My heart swelled with pride and ache. "You can talk to the whole world if you want to," I said. "You've earned the mic." Her opportunity came sooner than we expected. A local elementary school teacher whose class had seen the news coverage reached out. Would Ivy be willing to visit and talk to the kids about disability, about kindness and courage? Ivy lit up when I told her. "Can I bring pictures and my old braces?" "Anything you want," I said, smiling. "This is your story." At Rosewood Bluffs, real change began to take root. Inspired by Ivy's strength and the community's shame, the HOA launched a full audit of every common space. Trails were widened. New ramps were ordered. The rose garden walkways were resurfaced with softer, wheelchair-safe materials. The playground, once a pretty but flawed space, was closed for renovation. Ivy was asked to help design its new layout alongside a local landscape architect. She requested sensory panels, adaptive swings, and her favorite addition, a flower mural painted low on the walls so kids in wheelchairs could touch it too. The community newsletter now included a section titled Voices of Inclusion. Ivy's name was the first featured. I watched my daughter go from burn victim to changemaker in less than 6 weeks, and I saw our quiet, clipped community begin to bloom, not because it was forced to, but because it finally understood what it meant to make space for everyone. As for Marla Whitmore, she remained in custody pending her court hearing. Her lawyer tried floating a plea deal. We refused. There would be no silence, no hush money, no slipping away in shame. Not this time. One evening, Ivy was sitting in bed practicing her speech for the school visit. She looked up suddenly. "Mom, do you think the playground will feel different when I go back?" I paused, considering her question. "It might," I said honestly, "but not because of what happened, because of what you did after." Ivy nodded. "Good," she whispered. "Then it was worth it." And in that moment, surrounded by rose-colored drawings, crumpled get-well cards, and a child who refused to let hate define her, I believed her. The garden had already started to change. The rest of the world just needed to catch up. The morning of the trial, Ivy sat at the kitchen table, her back a little straighter than it had been weeks before, her skin still healing beneath the loose cotton shirt I helped her button. The light from the window caught the edge of her burn scars fading, but visible, and illuminated the small index cards she'd laid out in front of her. "Do you think the judge will listen to someone like me?" she asked softly, eyes fixed on her handwriting. "Someone like you," I said, kneeling beside her, "is exactly who this courtroom needs to hear from." She nodded once, resolute, then slipped the cards into her backpack and rolled toward the front door. We were ready, not just for the verdict, but for everything that came after. The courthouse in San Mateo was modest compared to the gleaming hospital corridors I was used to, but it felt larger than life that day. The community had shown up in full, parents, children, school teachers, and neighbors, who had once feared Marla Whitmore's wrath, but now stood shoulder to shoulder in quiet solidarity. Some held handmade signs with phrases like, "Justice for Ivy" and "No child should fear a playground." And right there in the second row sat Dean Marshall, his firefighter's posture unshaken, the original video evidence in his phone ready if the defense tried to twist the narrative. Marla entered through the side door wearing a gray pantsuit 2 sizes too large for her once proud frame. Her perfectly highlighted bob had grown out at the roots, and her expression, once so smug and cold, now flickered between defiance and dread. The weight of public shame, criminal charges, and a crumbling personal life had clearly pressed in on her, but none of it softened the truth of what she'd done. The judge, a stern, middle-aged woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, called the proceedings to order. When asked how she pleaded, Marla stood, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. "Guilty, Your Honor." There was a ripple in the courtroom, hushed but unmistakable. Ivy's fingers curled around mine. She had been prepared to testify, to share her story in her own words, but now that wouldn't be necessary. Still, the judge motioned toward us. "Miss Carter," she said, "I understand you prepared a statement. Would you still like to speak?" Ivy looked at me, then at the judge, and nodded. "Yes, please." She wheeled herself to the front of the courtroom with more grace than I thought possible, parked herself beside the witness stand, and took a breath that steadied the entire room. "My name is Ivy Carter. I'm 11 years old. I got burned on a Saturday morning because someone thought I didn't belong in a garden. But I do belong there. I belong in playgrounds and parks at school, and in this community just like every other kid. What happened to me hurt a lot. It still does. But I don't want to be afraid. I want to make sure no other kid gets treated like I was just because they're different." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I don't hate Mrs. Whitmore. I just hope she learns that being in charge doesn't mean you get to hurt people. It means you're supposed to protect them." Silence followed, broken only by the sound of the judge gently clearing her throat. "Thank you, Ivy," she said with something close to reverence. Then she turned to Marla. "This court views your actions as a grievous abuse of power, a blatant act of discrimination, and a cruel assault on a child. The evidence is overwhelming. The community you claim to protect has unanimously condemned your behavior. I am sentencing you to 3 years in state prison, 5 years probation, court-mandated counseling for anger and bias management, and a permanent restraining order. You will remain at least 500 feet away from Ivy Carter and her family at all times." Marla barely reacted. Her attorney placed a hand on her shoulder, but she didn't meet anyone's gaze as the bailiff led her away. That was the last time we saw her, Her house in Rosewood Bluffs was put on the market within the month, its roses overgrown and unkempt, the once pristine yard fading into neglect. Rumors swirled that she'd been abandoned by her own family. If true, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet sense of finality. But Ivy's story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. By the time fall arrived, Ivy had spoken at 4 local elementary schools, 2 churches, and even a youth leadership event sponsored by the mayor's office. She shared her journey, not just the burn, but the wheelchair, the therapy, the quiet loneliness of being treated like she didn't fit. And every time the audience listened, moved not by pity, but by the clarity of her voice. Accessibility, she told a class of 4th graders, isn't just about ramps and buttons. It's about respect. It's about making space so everyone can feel welcome. The community took her words to heart. The Rosewood Bluffs HOA, under new leadership, voted to allocate funds to fully redesign the community playground and rose gardens. Ivy was invited to be part of the planning committee alongside a local landscape architect named Miles Turner, a soft-spoken man with a hearing aid and a gentle demeanor who became fast friends with Ivy over their shared love of wildflowers. "You know what would be cool," she said during one design meeting, "if we made a flower wall low enough that kids in wheelchairs could touch it. Real petals, but sealed in resin, like a garden you can keep forever." Miles beamed. "Let's do it." Construction began in early spring. The playground was temporarily closed, but instead of frustration, the closure inspired curiosity. Children peered through fences, watching adaptive swings go up, textured surfaces being laid, and wide ramps winding through new sensory zones filled with lavender, mint, and rose plants. The final addition was the mural designed by Ivy, painted by local students, and coated in protective laminate so tiny fingers could run across it without worry. At the center of the mural was a message in gold paint: "Let every child bloom without fear." The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew dozens: parents, teachers, journalists, a few city council members. Dean Marshall emceed, introducing Ivy with a proud, booming voice. "And now the girl who reminded us what community really means, Miss Ivy Carter." She rolled up to the microphone, a little nervous but composed. Her burn scars had faded into soft pink lines, barely visible beneath her cap-sleeve dress. "I was scared the first time I came to this playground," she said into the mic. "And then I was hurt. But now I'm not scared. I'm proud. This isn't just a playground anymore. It's a promise that kids like me and kids not like me can laugh and play and be safe together." Her eyes scanned the crowd. "She tried to stop me from being part of this garden. But now the garden has changed for everyone. Hate didn't win here. Love did." The applause was thunderous. People cried openly. Teachers hugged each other. A little girl in a pink wheelchair rolled forward and handed Ivy a daisy, whispering, "Thank you for making a place for me too." Ivy took it with tears in her eyes. "That's exactly why we did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That night, as we sat on the porch under the stars, Ivy leaned against my shoulder. "Do you think people will forget?" she asked. "People forget bad things fast." I shook my head. "They might forget what happened, but they'll never forget what you built because of it." Ivy nodded slowly, then whispered, "Good. I want the garden to remember." And it would. The flowers would keep blooming, the ramps would stay wide, the mural would remain within reach of every hand, because one girl had the courage to say she belonged, and an entire community finally had the courage to agree. What happened to Ivy Carter wasn't just a senseless act of cruelty. It was a mirror held up to a community and a reminder that silence can be just as damaging as violence. But in the aftermath of that horrifying day, something extraordinary bloomed: courage, accountability, and lasting change. The lesson here is simple yet powerful: never underestimate the voice of the unheard. Ivy was just 11 years old. She was sitting in a wheelchair recovering from a life-changing accident when someone tried to make her feel invisible. But instead of retreating into fear, Ivy chose to speak, to advocate, and to lead. And because of her bravery, an entire neighborhood redefined what inclusion looks like, not just in word, but in action. This story also reminds us of the importance of bystanders becoming upstanders. When Dean Marshall, the retired firefighter, had the instinct to record what was happening, he gave truth a voice that could not be silenced. When neighbors stopped turning a blind eye and started speaking out, they proved that real community means standing together, especially when it's uncomfortable. When systems like HOAs are left unchecked, power can be twisted. But when people unite, even the deepest roots of injustice can be pulled out. So what can we take away from Ivy's story? First, teach your children empathy, not just tolerance. Show them what it means to create space for others. Second, hold your leaders accountable, whether it's a neighborhood president or a public official. Third, and most importantly, never allow someone's differences, be it disability, background, or circumstance, to be weaponized against them. Ivy reminded us that hate doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hides behind rules, policies, or polite smiles. But when you strip it down, it's still hate. And the only real way to defeat it isn't with revenge, it's with action, awareness, and love. From all of us at Us Justice Stories. Thank you for listening to Ivy's powerful journey. Thank you for standing with children who deserve to feel safe. And thank you for believing, like we do, that every child has the right to bloom, no matter their abilities, no matter their challenges, no matter where they roll, walk, or run. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes in some way, we invite you to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this message with others. Together, we're building a platform where voices like Ivy's are never silenced again. Until next time, stay strong, speak up, and always stand for what's right.